Okay, it says we're live. You should be seeing a post that says that I've started a live video. So come and join me. All right, I am going to bring Dr. Amanda Legge. Just give it a minute. Connecting. Dr. Legge, are you with us? There you are.
Nope.
Oops. Yeah, you're going to have to, can you bring your camera down a little bit or up?
Move some of this stuff.
Yeah, we're getting there.
It's odd that it's making my iPad hold vertically. That's what I'm not anticipating.
Well,
yes, let me go. I can stack on some books.
Unfortunately, if I start it this way, I can't change it.
Okay, let me get some books.
Oops, sorry. Wow, we have 10 watching already? All right. Yeah. And it's 3 minutes. Well, now you're upside down. Hi.
Thought it
there you go. We'll get it. We'll get it.
So,
we'll get it. We have minutes yet. There we go. I'm sorry, we should have talked about the orientation ahead of time. Well, we have Cynthia Rehill.
all right. Let's see if this works.
Sorry. We should have talked about this ahead of time.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's going to be the best I think I'm going to get.
There you go. That's good. That's good. There. How's that?
That's better.
That's better.
How are you?
I'm fine. I should have talked to you about the orientation ahead of time. I didn't even think about it.
Oh, that's all right.
We're here. We're here. Now I have to figure out how I am going to see the comments on my iPad. And oh, that's it. Knock everything over in my office while I'm doing this. We have nine people. We have Mary and Sherry and Susan. When I was young, and this is many moons ago, there was a TV show with a, what was her name? Miss Nancy or something or other. Hi, Susan. And she used to have a magic mirror. And at the end, she would say, magic mirror, who do we have today? Or something like that. And that's who I feel like I am right now. As I say, hello, we have Tina. And I'm still not. Oh, there we go. And we have Margaret. Great. I'm afraid to tackle the last names of some of these folks, so we'll just go with the first names. Hi.
That's probably.
Yeah, probably a good idea, huh? As long as I get your name right this time. I think I can. Okay.
We'll try it.
Yeah, we're going to give them a few more minutes. We've got 12 people. That's good. Getting better all the time. All right. Got to thank you for giving up part of your Sunday to do this.
You're welcome.
All right, here we go. There's Joan. I see Joan as well. All right. Now, what part of Pennsylvania are you in again?
Like northeast-ish. I'm about an hour away from Hershey and
Oh.
maybe an hour and a half from Philly.
Okay, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and
Okay.
that doesn't make me an expert on Eastern Pennsylvania, but I know some
No,
folks.
ditto.
I'm sorry?
I said, and the other way around. Eastern and
Oh.
Western Pennsylvania are two very different worlds.
It sure is, especially since it's such a wide state. Oh,
Yeah.
hello, Sharon. Sharon, one of our great moderators, is on. We have Donna. Okay, Margaret, Sherry, Susan, Joan, Donna. We have a Baker. No, we have an even dozen, I should say. Okay. Ah, did it again. Ah, here we go. We've got the baker's dozen now. Yeah, an echo. Margaret's hearing an echo. I don't know what that would be. There seems to be a.
See if they're still here now. Did it clear itself up as people were coming in?
Yeah, it may be. It may be just the bandwidth that we each have too. So this is only the second live show we're doing. So this is all. Oh, and we have Len. Hello, Len. Yes, this is only the second live video, so we're kind of learning as we go. I give it a few more minutes. What time? Okay,
Sounds
it's 2.
good.
Okay. All right. I can actually look. Maybe I don't need my iPad. We'll see. Ah, 16. All right. There, we're really 17. Woohoo. Let's see who we have. We have Sharon, Mary, Sherry, Susan, Donna, Len, and Susie. Greetings to all. If you don't know yet, I'm Linda, the administrator. I'll introduce our guest in a minute. We're going to give everybody a chance to join us. Okay, anybody else hearing an echo? I think I'm on, not sure. Carolyn, you're on. You made it, Carolyn. You are on. Yay. Carolyn wasn't sure she could do this, but she did. Yay. Told you it was easy. Yeah. All right. Who else? Let's see. Okay. Did I miss greeting anybody? I think I got everybody. So, oops. No echo. I'm not hearing an echo. So it may just be that we're, well, let's face it, we're spread out all over the place. And so some of you may have some delays. You may see the video pause at some points. We had that happen on Wednesday. Hopefully it won't be too disconcerting. Okay, we have Robin. Hey, Robin, welcome. And give it 5 more minutes. We'll start at 4:10 on the dot. How about that?
Sounds good to me.
And Dr. Legge, did I get it right? Legge. Oh, I screwed it up. Dr.
Oh, it's okay. I know. Legge.
Sorry. I will introduce you first and then turn it over to you.
Sounds good.
I can't believe that. I practice. I have a note here with Legge in big. I screwed it.
Yes, wrong. It's my husband's name. I blame him.
Very well. Having been raised with the name Chernick, I married a man with a simple last name, Moore.
Yeah, you go the right way.
Mm-hmm.
The right direction.
All right. Looks like we may have lost a few people. Oh, we have Debbie. Debbie, Robin, Susie, Lynn, Donna, Susan, Sherry, Mary, Sharon. There we go. There shouldn't be any problems. It's pretty straightforward. There we go. Thanks, Sharon, for posting the note on my 1 hour reminder. I appreciate that. Now, see, that was so easy. The next time you do one, you will just come on at the last minute. How about that?
Well, at least it was simple. You never know with technology.
Boy, that's true. That's true. Echo better. Yay. I'm glad, Margaret. We've got 15. That's good. I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and get started.
Sure.
All right. I want to introduce you to Dr. Amanda Legge, who is a part of a busy practice in Northeast Pennsylvania. It's Wyomissing. Did I get that right?
Did.
Wyomissing Optometric Center in Northeast Pennsylvania. She's an opinion leader for MacuLogic, which is a device that measures dark adaptation. She'll tell you about why that is often something that detects macular degeneration before it can be seen in the eye. She also lectures for Notal Vision, which has the 4C Home device. She can tell you about that as well, but basically it is a home device that checks the macula regularly, and if there are any changes, it sends a notification to the doctor, which is pretty cool. She lectures. She lectures in her state and national optometric association or associations. She's also on the board of her local Banks County Vision Resource Center. She's a busy lady. And so we're very, and you have 2 children and a husband, is that right?
I do, yes. They're running around upstairs as we speak.
Oh, okay. Well, you're so busy. We are so glad that you've chosen to be here with us. And I want to thank you for your recent posts that are so very detailed and yet simple to understand. I took the last one and put it into the guide 2, I should say, frequently asked questions, because it is really helpful and very clear. So thank you very much for that. And without further ado, there you go, Dr. Legge. You're on.
So I'll say, with regards to education, like that is probably my passion in medicine. And what I harp on with, we have interns, optometry interns that come through our practice, and that I harp on them the most, the art of a good history taking and education. And I had my own experience when this was pre-optometry school, so I really knew nothing about the eye, but my grandmother at a routine eye exam was told she had macular degeneration. And I remember very vividly what that feeling felt like for her. And I'm very, very close with her, so it was a big deal for me too. Yeah. And given very little information, did send us to a retina specialist. And I remember going along with her then, because like at this point I was sort of interested in optometry, but I was still in college. So I went along with, and she ended up not having macular degeneration. She has something different called vitelliform macular dystrophy, which is confused with macular degeneration often that I see. It has a, you know, generally better prognosis, that you really typically don't lose vision from that older on. So for us, we didn't have to deal with the long-term issues of vision deterioration that way. But I remember very much how we got minimal information, both from the optometrist at diagnosis and from the retina specialist. He kind of sat us in a room and like made us watch a video, which looked like something you watched in 8th grade on a VHS. It wasn't very informative. And that's really all we got about macular degeneration. And that was 15 years ago. I mean, I've been in practice 10 and optometry school for 4. So it's 15 years ago. And to be completely honest, not much has changed in regards to the diagnosis and education, et cetera, about the disease. So my passion kind of lies, now that we know from a whole bunch of studies that there are things to do to slow it down, you know, diet and the control of comorbid conditions and exercise and stop smoking. And there's all these things that we now know we can do, that my passion really is trying to find this and identify it as early as possible, so that my goal one is to hopefully, if we initiate all of these situations, is you'll never have vision loss from it. Or, you know, we slow it down enough. It's interesting, in school, I remember them teaching us very much with regards to AREDS vitamins, you know, you just need to slow it down long enough until they would lose vision at like 130. And by then it won't matter. And like, haha, it was a funny joke, whatever. And at the time I took it that way. Yeah. But now, like, thinking in my mind, in America, macular degeneration is the leading cause of blindness in people over the age of 60. In the US as a statistic. And so you can bet there is a ton of
the one thing I want to just ask, because I know this happens in my group, when you say it's the #1 cause of blindness in America, you mean legal blindness, right?
I mean legal blindness, yes.
Thank you, because it scares my folks a lot, and it's repeated. You're not the only one, and I understand why you do. So I just wanted to clarify that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So it's yeah, the #1 cause of leading blindness, legal blindness over the age of 60 in America. So, you know, at this point, we know there's things to do, and you can bet that pharmaceutical companies and research institutions are throwing millions and millions of dollars into research to try to find a treatment and reverse this. So now my mantra isn't let's just hold it off until you're 130 and who cares. It's let's hold it off for 7 years, 10 years, and then something may be completely different, that now we've maintained your vision for, you know, X amount of time until something new comes up in the research, which I fully expect something to happen in the next, you know, 10, 15 years, just knowing some of the things coming down the grapevine. All of it's very, very early. So I don't know a ton about any of that, but there's some like promising things that keep going around with the eye care community. So that's like my mantra now, is like, let's catch it early. Let's do things to intervene and slow it down. And we're going to maintain your vision as long as possible. And hopefully something changes. And then, you know, goal 2 is once you have macular degeneration and we're doing all of these things correctly, then it's a matter of watching them, you know, really closely, because at any point, the dry form, which everybody typically starts in by far, the dry form can convert to the wet form. And the wet form typically deteriorates vision pretty quickly over weeks to months, as opposed to the dry typically takes years to steal your vision. And so the earlier we identify conversion to wet and start the anti-VEGF injections, I mean, a couple of things with it. The earlier you catch it, typically you can taper off of those injections and stop them much more often than caught later. So you might not be on those injections for life, like a lot of people seem to be. And 2, it just responds better to treatment too, because you're catching it early on in that process. There was a good question earlier I answered, but it was sort of in a comment section where what's the difference between fluid and blood with wet macular degeneration? And I said it's the same concept for both, that as these new blood vessels grow underneath the retina, they're very fragile, so they very easily, what we say, leak and bleed. So early on, if there's just a little disruption in the blood vessels, you just get pushed out some plasma, which is just like the clear liquidy portion of the blood. So you get this fluid, but as we look in, it's clear pockets of bubbles, more or less. Liquid bubbles is what it looks like for the fluid. The bleed is when the red blood cells also rush in with the plasma, so it looks actually red, like true blood. Typically that needs more disruption of the blood vessels, so it's a little bit more advanced. But it depends on a lot of factors what the outcome ultimately is. But that's the difference between the two. So I'm looking for sometimes invisible things in the retina, these tiny, tiny pockets of fluid that have started. And hopefully before my patients notice any changes. So I have a dozen patients right now. I've been collecting some data, but I have a dozen patients right now who, just as I've seen them routinely over time, I've caught their conversion to wet before their vision changed on the eye chart, before they had symptoms, and before it showed up on the Amsler grid. So, you know, that's goal number 2, is once people are diagnosed and on the correct management strategy, my job then is to monitor that if that conversion happens, you know, we take care of it as soon as possible. Again, better visual outcome overall. So I think those are the 2 things here that I want to talk about the most, because I want to explain macular degeneration as simply as possible. And then it's going to make sense as to why dark adaptation also is the earliest biomarker that we can clinically now measure, like in a practical setting in an eye doctor's office, as opposed to a laboratory. So generally, macular degeneration is a disease where the bottom layer of the retina, the cells just don't work quite as well. And these are sort of like pumps to the retina. They pump nutrients in and they pump waste products out. So the retina, just like every other cell in our body, it takes up light, it lets us see, it converts that to energy. And as the cells do their job, they also produce waste. So that waste typically is then pushed through this bottom layer called the retinal pigment epithelium, RPE. So typically it's pushed through there as little pumps, if you will, and underneath into the bloodstream, and that waste gets eliminated with all of the waste in our body. Macular degeneration is really a disease where that transport process breaks down, and that doesn't quite get out as it should. So as that happens, they've shown in biomicroscopy, electron biomicroscopy, which is really not something we can see in live human eyes right now, but they've studied it with donor eyes, kind of, you know, cutting the tissue and studying it, that they've found that people have this layer, microscopic layer of debris and waste products under the retina, sometimes 3 to 5 years before we start to see it as drusen. And so that's the first clinical sign that we get as eye doctors for macular degeneration, are these little yellow bumps in the macula that we call drusen. And those are accumulation of waste debris. And really, if you think of it, they're more like peaks to an iceberg. So it's the whole transport system of the entire macula that's breaking down. And that tiny layer of waste is now just thick enough in that area that it peaked up. And now we can actually see it as a druse or multiple, you know, drusen at a time. And as macular degeneration progresses, it's essentially that same process that gets worse over time. So that waste product gets thicker as the macular degeneration progresses, which now not only traps the waste in the retina, it traps the nutrients from the blood vessels underneath to get through that whole layer and nourish the retina. So that's typically how dry macular degeneration continues to progress, that the nutrients can't push through that anymore, and it's not getting the nutrition it needs, so it essentially atrophies or it dies off. So you get geographic atrophy, and geographic atrophy is just like patches of missing retina that have just died because of malnourishment, in simplest terms. 20% of the time-ish, the body can try to have this good idea, in theory, to grow new blood vessels. And those new blood vessels, theoretically, would grow through that layer and try to nourish the retina and get more oxygen a different way. So we call it neovascularization when that happens. And it sounds like a great idea, except that neovascularization is never the same structure and has the same integrity of the blood vessels we're born with, which means they're just really fragile. And so they leak and they bleed. And once they are underneath the retina, they don't usually help the situation, even though it is good in theory. There's this weak, and then they start to leak and exudate, and all of that fluid builds up in the retina because of the leaking blood vessels. And that puts pressure and damage on the rods and cones and what we see, and that's how you lose vision that way. It also literally is like fluid accumulation in the retina, that it's like looking through, you know, really thick gel water. That's why everything gets, like, we call it metamorphopsia, that it's all like wavy, blurry, distorted. And that metamorphopsia can change or can stay there, you know, as the injections will help bring that down. The retina can look really good again, you know, on the OCT scans, but the retina really is a direct extension of the brain. And so a lot of what we know about the brain is neurons don't regenerate, they don't come back. So even though the OCT might look great to us in anatomy, there's just things that we can't measure yet in live patients to show like the, you know, the disconnect between the nerves and stuff that has happened as that's stretched out because of the fluid that's in there. Which is why the earlier we catch that and intervene, the less like pooling, the less tension on all of those nerves and photoreceptors there are, so that when the OCT does look back to normal, that you maintain better vision. It's just this microscopic stuff that we can't quite visualize yet with the technology that we have, but that stuff's improving all the time too. So that's kind of macular degeneration as a whole, really, in like simplest terms from start to the very end. It's really all the same process with regards to that waste deposition and not getting the right amount of nutrients to the retina, when the body responds, you know, one way or the other. And then my passion sort of came in with this in 2013. My practice was approached by a man named Greg Jackson, who has done 20 plus years of research in macular degeneration, knows much more than I do about macular degeneration, to be frank, on a scientific level. And he and colleagues discovered that delayed dark adaptation is related to macular degeneration. And not only is it related to it, it's the earliest thing that changes in macular degeneration. And the reason why that happens is as that waste product sort of builds up underneath the retina, even though we can't visualize it quite yet clinically, vitamin A, which we all know is good for your eyes, that's why we talk about carrots all the time and make those comments, but vitamin A is actually a really big molecule. So you can get some nutrients into the retina, but because vitamin A is much larger than the rest, it gets pushed through that waste layer much less quantities than normal much early on. And it's really because of that. So we need vitamin A for our rods, the dark part of our cells, to regenerate so we can see in the dark. So imagine going from like a bright sunny day into a movie theater, and how it takes, you know, there's that little adjustment everybody has that you can't quite see anything, and then, you know, gradually your vision gets better and you can see your row and where you're going to. It takes people a lot longer for that with macular degeneration, and it's really because of this very localized vitamin A deficiency in the macula. So what they've shown with dark adaptation is having a very specific flash in part of your retina. It's sort of the same luminance as your iPhone camera flash, actually, but it's really localized. And then essentially that bleaches the retina like the bright sunny day. And then the patient is pressing a button and there's a light that just lights up. You press a button every time you see the light come. And that light gradually over time, it gets dimmer and dimmer. And then if you don't see it, it'll get a little brighter. You click the button again, get a little dimmer until you don't see it, get a little brighter. So it's all a matter of test of time. It's from that bright flash that everybody gets in the beginning. And it's timing out how long it takes you to be able to see the dimmest flash that it shows you at the very end. So it's a test of time. So the normal value for that, most people should be able to do that easily in less than 6.5 minutes, is what they've discovered with the cutoff. And it's not seconds of delay with macular degeneration, it's minutes of delay. So some patients nervous, like, oh, I don't know if I clicked the button. I don't know if I did it right. I'm a little nervous. I'm like, I'm not concerned about a couple of seconds. That means nothing to me. It really is minutes of delay. So on average, my patients with,
I was just going to say, you're talking about the Maculogic testing device, right?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Go.
Yeah. So
okay,
with the testing. So 6.5 minutes is normal. My early macular degeneration patients, I'd say on average, are about 10 minutes. The intermediate phase takes 15 to 20 minutes to do that test. It really has no clinical utility to me once somebody gets to 20 minutes. I know that their macular degeneration is fairly advanced at that point, and that's regardless of what their retina looks like to me. Because now we have a study that we can look at the function of the macula, the retina, as well as the structure. And putting those two things together is just a lot more information than looking at one thing alone, like just the anatomy or the OCT. So I stop at 20 minutes. It doesn't have any clinical utility of how I manage after that. But in the studies, patients with late macular degeneration, it took them 45 minutes to do that same test that most people do in less than 6.5.
Wow.
So it's a huge amount of delay that happens, yeah, over time. So the way that I use it now in my practice is we know because of this waste deposition that there's something happening underneath the surface, even if I can't see it. So we often run this test totally free of charge as like a screening to anybody over the age of 60. And we do it free. We used to try to do like a, pay for service or so, but we, as a practice, decided that this was so important and we were catching so many abnormals that it was worth it to our patients to just do it for free. So in our practice, if you're over the age of 60, you have it done. And then if it's abnormal, we'll talk about it from there, which I can chat about in a little bit too. But that's really how I catch it early, have discussions, education early. And I think even across the board, if we as eye doctors just identify and educate, do nothing else, not talk about nutraceuticals, nothing, just educate about the disease, about healthy lifestyles, about not smoking, patients would be better off for it, period. So as I lecture to the eye care community, like my bare minimum suggestion, like, please just tell them about the disease, tell them about dry versus wet, what they're supposed to look for, what I'm doing, what they're doing, and lifestyle changes. There's a ton of controversy in the eye care world about the nutraceuticals, and my point is all the time to those doctors that want to argue back and forth about it is, but if you're educating them, you're already doing more than the majority of eye care. And that's sort of across the board, optometry and ophthalmology.
Can you define nutraceuticals for us?
Vitamins. So nutraceuticals is a medical term.
Yep, gotcha.
Over the counter things. Yep.
Okay.
I think somebody asked like what the test was. So it's by Maculogix, Maclugix. I think. I'm terrible spelling things out loud, but it's by Maculogix. It's dark adaptation. And one thing I recommend, especially for people who are looking for family members or having this diagnosed early, on the Maculogix website, you can put in your location and it'll tell you all the doctors that have this available in their practice. And so that's one way to get started, and at least somebody.
We have that. You gave us that link before, and what I'll do is after this or tomorrow, I will put a post up with that link again. Okay. So anybody who's watching, I'll link tomorrow or later. Go ahead.
And I'm just so impressed with and why I stand behind Maculogix 100%, even as not being a key opinion leader for them, is that when they started selling their device in 2013, I would go out with Greg Jackson and educate doctors in our area. So conveniently, Maculogix and their company is set up in Hershey, which is again an hour away from me. So part of it was luck and geography. But he and I went out several times to educate doctors and tell them, hey, there's this new technology, it's really cool, like it's backed by science, and like we're going to catch this a lot earlier, it's going to be great. I was super pumped about it. So we went out to several meetings and lectures, and the feedback was so sad. As in, most doctors at the end of it, it's like, oh cool, but I can't do anything about it anyway, so why do I care? I'm like, why do you care? And so over years, as we've learned that was sort of the mindset generally across the country, and from their research, Maculogix and their team, that again was optometry and ophthalmology treated it the same and had the same percentages of answers that way. They shifted their entire business model, and why I am so involved with them now is that since about 2016, it's AMD education for eye doctors first, and sell their instruments second. Which I love. They put a ton of money into education. We try to do online peer-to-peer review sessions between doctors that can just come on and ask us questions about it. So there's a bunch of key opinion leaders around the country for them that we've all been out, like, boots on the ground, trying to get this from the ground up. And generally, I would say it's starting to gain traction, that at least most eye doctors across the nation now are aware of dark adaptation, are aware that it can catch macular degeneration early. And honestly, where the issue lies is breaking that glass ceiling of convincing doctors that there is something to do about it and it is worthwhile. Because that's the final pushback. We can educate about all this stuff and then go, You know, here's the instrument, it's gonna be awesome. And well, what am I gonna do about it? Like, just shut down. And so it's amazing. So that's where I'm at, that I'm extremely passionate about the disease, both from the patient's perspective, because if we're not doing it correctly, it's not us who suffers, it's patients, you know, that suffer, and they're not getting the education. So that's mostly where I come from, and I really believe that it's a lack of awareness, not just from patients. It's because of us that patients aren't aware, but it's the lack of awareness on our end. And who knows what the reason is for that? Like, I'm not going to speculate too much, but my only thought is that everyone talks about AREDS. Everyone talks about AREDS 1. Everybody talks about AREDS 2. It's a huge study, right? Thousands and thousands of patients. And it's a good study, and it was generally well designed, but there are some flaws to it. But because it's a huge study, everybody just defaults to that. So there's never been a huge study to show that all these lifestyle changes and stuff definitely makes a difference. There's thousands of small studies that prove it over and over and over again that it makes a difference. So we're not fed this information on a silver platter, and it's a lot harder, you know, just as doctors, if you're not totally interested in it, to know it and be confident in it and, you know, put it out there, because obviously you get a lot of contradicting stuff along the way. So that's what I'll say about that. And I apologize on the behalf of eye care.
It's really hard for patients to dig through the research themselves. I have some of a background in research, and just going through what I did in the last 2 months to try to dig through the carotenoid research, it's not easy. You know, we're not supposed to have to do that. We're supposed to depend on people who have the education, who, you know, go and study these studies. So I guess maybe that's all I'll say about that.
It's just very difficult, and it really, it's a bunch of small studies that are so dispersed throughout the world, and it's just hard to put that information together, but it's out there, and we know that it works. And I'm totally on board with the carotenoids. You know, if somebody wants to start something early, that is what I recommend. It minimally has interactions with medications. It really has no side effects. Right. You can't really overdose on it.
Right.
You know, I think some of the stuff, I don't know if you have like more than 30-ish milligrams a day, that you can have like yellowing of your skin. It's like worst case scenario, you know, like eating too many carrots, your skin kind of turns orange. It's the same situation because it's carotenoid as well. So they're really safe to take, and there's no reason not to recommend it to patients. So the biggest pushback I have from ophthalmology with discussions about, you know, AREDS and when to start people on and stuff, it's like, well, they have a lot of side effects with medications. They're all older. I don't want to put any patients on more medications than what they need. And believe me, I appreciate that. It's a lot of meds that these older patients take a lot, because that's the population we're dealing with, macular degeneration. But again, if you do nothing, it's not helping the situation at all. You have to believe in the disease. Even again, just education and monitoring the patients appropriately, you're going to have better outcomes than not. Well, you know, just inside information, like, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, the thing about the carotenoids, though, through foods, we can get other nutrients that we need. You know, carotenoids are not the only thing we need. They're important, but we do have, you know, we need the vitamin B, we need vitamin D, we need to eat the rainbow. You know, we need to learn to eat differently. Do you agree with that?
Oh, so true. Yes. And generally, most of the studies show that if you get the nutrients from diet as opposed to a vitamin or a pill, it's better absorbed by our body. And with some of the studies, like even, you know, AREDS 2, we were all so excited about AREDS 2. You know, it's coming out, and we thought it was going to be different, that it was going to treat early AMD. Like, we had such high hopes for AREDS 2. And then the results came out, and we were all like, what do we do with this? Like, it's a non-answer. It didn't give us any answers. It made it safer by taking out the beta carotene, because smokers couldn't take it. It increased the risk of lung cancer. So it made it safer, but it didn't really show a whole lot else about it. It was pretty disappointing overall. But the carotenoids in AREDS 2, what they did show, if you look at some of the subsections, is that the people who were most deficient
Yeah.
in lutein, zeaxanthin, carotenoids benefited a whole lot more. It's like 46% more than the people who had good dietary intake of
Right.
it. So that's like a conversation I'll have with my patients. Like, what is your diet generally like? Like, are you a super healthy person? Are you already on that situation? And they weren't on any special diet, those patients. That they weren't on a Mediterranean diet. They just ate healthier than the people that didn't have as high quantities of.
And I think one of the things that we need to educate people about is eating healthy has to be defined. It's not just, eating chicken. And my mother changed my dad's diet when he had high blood pressure. Okay, so but eating healthy was completely different for blood pressure than it is for our eyes. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It
is in general. People just they're not aware of it. Like, I talk to my diabetics all the time. Like, what do you know about your diet? What do you eat generally? And they have no education on it. I'll tell a funny story about my dad. Years ago, he went to his doctor, and he was like borderline high blood pressure, like borderline diabetes. And the doctor said, well, change your diet. Let's follow up in a couple of months. We'll repeat the blood work and see where you're at, and then we'll decide about medicine. Okay. A couple of months goes by. He goes back, and everything's worse. I'm like, Dad, well, what are you eating? Well, I changed everything to fruit, which is sugar.
Yeah.
And I switched drinking sodas and stuff to Gatorade, which is salt, which raises your blood pressure. And so that was really eye-opening for me. Like, my dad's a very intelligent person, but just what we think is healthy isn't necessarily what our body needs and nutrients needs. And that's, a whole discussion of another time topic too, but it's very important.
I don't want to lose these things. Sharon asked if you think that taking the carotenoids would reduce the presence of drusen once they appear. Is there any research? I haven't seen any about that.
I haven't seen any research. Just talking to other doctors who are very involved with AMD in their practice, we've all sort of said that maybe we've seen drusen reduce in a person here and there. It's nothing I ever tell a patient to expect. It's really not the norm. The purpose of it at this point, there's no reversal. It's a matter of giving the retina nutrients it's lacking because of that waste layer that's building up. So, the thought of why didn't AREDs work for early macular degeneration? Like, why wasn't that proven? Part of it could be those patients weren't studied long enough, because you can be in early stage for a long time. Yep. And part of it is, that waste layer isn't as thick as patients in intermediate, as patients in late. So maybe they really are getting enough nutrients during those early stages that it didn't make a difference. Now, that being said, when a person converts from early to intermediate is really nitpicky. So the way it's defined in AREDs is that early macular degeneration, we say, has medium drusen. Yeah. What does that mean? It's like 53 to 125 microns.
Microns, yeah.
What does that mean? I don't have any measurement like that. So, but that's the definition in AREDs, 53 to 125 microns. And you can have dozens of those drusen throughout your entire retina. And as long as they're medium sized, you're technically in early stage.
Yeah.
Intermediate AMD is defined by AREDs of having one large drusen, which is greater than 125 microns or microread. One. So you can have a patient that, you look in, you're like, oh man, look at all this drusen in there. But technically they're early. And then you can also look in, a bigger mistake is to look in and say, oh, it doesn't look that bad. There's only like one or two there, but they're large size. That person is technically intermediate, by the AREDS definition. And that is very confusing, especially for new doctors or doctors that are older that haven't kept up with that, because it's a subtle difference.
Yeah.
That my argument too with AREDS is like, because it's a continuum of a disease, with this waste deposition, because it's a continuum, at some point that retina isn't going to be nourished enough. And it might not be the same for every person. We all know that we're different, and everybody responds differently. Everybody has different absorption rates depending on other medications you take, etc. So I never know when a patient becomes intermediate to then, say, let's take AREDs in between visits or so. So typically with my patients, we'll go through, you have macular degeneration. This is the study. Even my early patients is like, this is the study. it says for intermediate, like, what's your diet? Where are you at with this kind of stuff? And I'll give them the option of carotenoids versus AREDs versus monitor, and we'll just try the lifestyle changes. I think that's just important because there's no right answer. We'll say it that way. There is no right answer. Like, doctors are not killing people by having them on AREDs. You know, maybe it won't do anything, but why wouldn't you want to take something to protect yourself? There's lots of, though, information about carotenoids helping in the early stages, so I'm much more recommending of that, especially, again, if their diet isn't healthy kind of lifestyle. I'm more prone to recommending the nutraceuticals or the carotenoids before somebody who has a really good diet.
Yeah.
So
now another question.
Based and
should former smokers stay away from carotenoid supplements? And in my understanding is it's only beta carotene that might be a problem, that lutein, zeaxanthin, and mesozeaxanthin aren't a problem with former smokers. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So AREDs, before AREDs 2 came out, there was AREDs for smokers and AREDs for non-smokers. They had to pay attention to, and all my smokers, I really made sure that they were on the right one. Like, I had them bring the boxes in and make sure. But the non-smoker version originally had beta carotene, which is often found in carrots more so, and it's related to the carotenoids, but it's just chemically a little different. And the studies showed that certain substances. Go ahead.
Want to make it clear, we're talking about not beta carotene in food, beta carotene in supplements.
Correct.
Or it's a former smoker doesn't have to avoid carrots, right?
Correct.
Okay, so
it's good to put out there. You're right about that.
Don't worry about
the of it. The smokers had a little bit of a higher risk developing lung cancer on it compared to non-smokers. So generally in the medical community, it was deemed safe for non-smokers, but the smoker version had lutein in it instead of beta carotene. So they knew they had to replace it with a carotenoid. And honestly, then it was a guess. Like, AREDs 2 hadn't come out. They just knew it was sort of comparable to beta carotene, and they put it in there so they didn't just take something away. So it was sort of a guess back in the day. And then it was proven with AREDs 2 that it's just as effective as the beta carotene was. So just for safety's sake, beta carotene was taken out of the AREDs formula altogether and is now just the single AREDs 2 formulation, which has the lutein component in it and not beta carotene.
Okay, good. Now, Margaret said that we were talking about an eye healthy diet. She said, and it's true, that not all doctors define eye healthy eating in the same way. Is that?
And that is because it's interesting. Different diets help different parts of the eye. So the other part of eye health where nutrition is talked about a lot is dry eye disease.
Mm-hmm.
So, macular degeneration, we talked a ton about the carotenoids. Omega-3s were studied in AREDs too, but found that it didn't really make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
In the eye care world, we still have a lot of questions about that. There's
Mm-hmm.
different formulations of omegas, and they used one that's not quite as absorbable in our system, and that's a whole other discussion. But we do know that omega-3s are really helpful in dry eye disease. It sort of changes the way our oils are made, and we have glands in our eyelids, our upper eyelid and lower eyelid, that produce oils for our tears, that having omegas really can soften those oils and help them express a little bit better. So that's talked a whole lot there too, but kind of separately from macular degeneration. So I agree with you, Linda, that a varied, colorful rainbow diet, something different every day, having fish intake is always good, and just making sure that you're not in a rut, we'll say, with eating, especially unhealthy eating.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, especially now with groceries going up in price, and I definitely appreciate that too. But just thinking about the long-term effects for our body, it makes huge differences down the road.
Back to the beta carotene. Sue asks, if you quit smoking 52 years ago, do you have to worry about beta carotene in supplements? Now remember, we're only talking about beta carotene in supplements, which means I think it was 15 milligrams of beta carotene was in AREDs.
Mm-hmm.
The one. So the question
Yeah.
is,
Yeah,
see,
there's beta carotene in multivitamins, and so it would they most 2/3 of patients in AREDS 1 were on a multivitamin, and 9 out of 10 patients in AREDS 2 were on a multivitamin. So I always make sure my patients are on a multivitamin. Most patients in those 2 studies were on Centrum Silver,
yeah,
if that matters, but that was the biggest one that
yeah,
they were taking. So it was really like the beta carotene in the AREDS formula plus that was in their multivitamin. So it was a little more than just that 15 milligrams, but it was just cumulative,
so
dosages that way.
50,
They've shown that over time, smoking reduces your risk of that, but they can't say for sure it eliminates the risk. Same thing with progression of macular degeneration, that smokers are 3 to 4 times more likely to develop macular degeneration and get worse forms of macular degeneration than non-smokers. But they have shown that as you quit, every 5-ish years, your risk goes down, not ever to the point of a non-smoker, but it goes significantly down as you stop smoking too. Because again, that's just gunking up the works, right? And your vasculature, and it's just one other barrier to nutrients getting into your retina and nourishing it. And that's why diet helps, because the more nutrients you have floating around in your bloodstream, the more that are likely going to get pushed in and nourish the retina. Same with exercise. That some of the studies have found that just walking 12 blocks a day, 3 days a week, lowers your risk by 30%. And the thought behind that, and if you have strenuous activity like you're sweating, bringing up to a sweat, it decreases your risk by like 70%. It's a huge deal. And the thought behind that is, as we exercise, we do release other hormones that seem to be good carriers for nutrients. So sort of like little cars that mainstream them into the tissues to nourish it. And we're just pumping more oxygen and blood flow and such to there. Again, just giving more nourishment to the retina over that time too. So that's why diet helps, and that's why exercise helps. That's why smoking makes it worse. And that's been proven over and over again in these small studies, that those are the most important things you can do in addition to controlling the 4 big things, right? In America anyway: high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity.
right. Now,
and all 4 of those, you can imagine, again, mess with your vasculature, mess with getting enough nutrients to the retina. So same sort of concept. So also, as I diagnose my patients with AMD, I just send a super short letter to their primary doctor, like, hey, I diagnose this, like, FYI, these 4 things that you manage can make it worse if they're not controlled. So maybe we should pay attention to it a little bit more and have them than people who might not have macular degeneration. So just like one other piece, because they always want to know when a diabetic has their eye exam, and if they have diabetic changes in the eye or not. But that's mostly because insurances tells them to. It does help, guide their decisions. That if we're diabetic retinopathy in the eyes, we have to assume it's happening elsewhere. It's just that when you're dilated, it's really the only time any doctor can see real-time working blood vessels without doing, something fancy, CAT scans or MRIs, etc. So it's a really unique part of the eye that way, that we do guide a lot of primary care decisions too.
Let me ask you a question about prevention. We talk a lot about prevention, the things for prevention. Would you say that the same things that we talk about for prevention would apply for slowing the disease? Exercise, making sure your numbers are okay, your blood pressure is normal, your weight's normal, etc. Would you say that is the case?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's going to help you. That's going to help you not only eye-wise, that's going to help you all the way over around-wise, right? Like, if you're suffering so much from diabetes, at some point, the diabetes is going to affect your life more than vision loss is going to. So, just that overall healthy lifestyle. And it's hard. I always feel bad for like my type 1 diabetics, for example, who are typically diagnosed when they're kids. When they get to like that teenage college stage, and everybody goes a little wild and everybody's drinking a little bit and their sugars just go way out of control. And maybe they don't have a lot of symptoms, but it's like, you don't know what you're going to, get yourself into 10, 15 years down the road. And that's hard for all of us, to imagine that future and that goal so far down the line when you're not getting benefits like right away.
Okay, I'll read you this question.
Sure, my patients are educated, like
okay.
You ask your question.
Yeah, I want to read this question from Susan so I get it right. How is the early onset or stage of MD when one has their gallbladder removed. Not all good foods would be agreeable to the body without their gallbladder. So does it increase MD more easily or rapidly when there's a family risk? I would say that if you can't eat all the good foods for anybody, that's where supplements may be a good option. And you say?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. You have to eat the best for you. Everybody has sensitivities or allergies, that they can't eat certain types of food. But like you said, that's when I'm having those conversations with patients, like in the early stage. Once they're intermediate, I'm recommending AREDS 2, period, because that's really the gold standard. That if I'm not doing that, like I'm kind of putting myself at risk at that point. I mean, I want to help my patients, but AREDS 2 at the intermediate stage really is like the gold standard. Everybody is on it at that point. So all of this talk really is like prevention and early stage where there's a lot of question marks about going on. So that is part of my conversation with the early macular degeneration patients is like, hey, this is what's going on and this is what the research says. But because maybe you can't eat this, I think maybe you'd benefit from it more than somebody who can eat all of this in their diet. Again, looking at the AREDS 2 group where the people who had lower concentrations of lutein in their diet and then in their bloodstream benefited more from the supplement by a significant amount compared to the people who ate really well and had good diets then.
Right. So with somebody who is not a good candidate for the AREDS 2 formulation, which, the early stage, and definitely somebody with wet in both eyes or geographic atrophy, a good multivitamin and especially carotenoids is something that certainly can't hurt. The carotenoids can't anyway.
Correct. My minimum discussion with eye doctors around the country is, education. There's a lot of controversy AREDS 2 in the early stage, but we know from all of these tiny studies that carotenoids make a difference, especially if your patients don't have the best diet. So if we could just diagnose early, educate, and talk about carotenoids, at least with our patients, about what's the benefit of it, leave it up to the patients to make that decision. Everybody is different. Some people do take a ton of pills, and I'm like, we could add this. I'm like, I really don't want to right now. And I eat a decent amount during the week. I'm like, all right, listen, it's not indicated for early AMD. That's okay. So we'll just watch it. And then if things are progressing, I'll recommend further that I think we should do it. Great. So just talking to people and getting their sense of it, it doesn't mean you have to put every person on the same cookie cutter treatment.
Sure.
You can talk to people as people and not just treat their eyeballs separate from their body.
That is so important, and it is so good to hear it from you. I just really hope that somehow we can hear it from more eye doctors. That is, to talk to their patients, to look at them as people. And I say the same to the researchers and everybody in the field. Please understand that there are people at the end of your research. There's people in your office. They go home, they have their lives just like you have your lives, and you want the best care. So give it to them. It's simple to me. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I have very low tolerance for doctors that don't educate, et cetera, with my family members or whatever. I'm like, find somebody different. Like, you're not handcuffed to this person forever. If you're not happy, find somebody different. It's okay. And my patients too, because I'm an optometrist, I have some of them like here. So here's a good example of optometry with this early AMD stuff. Retina specialists see wet AMD all day. Since anti-VEGF became a thing, and thank goodness it became a thing, because before that, we would quite literally watch people just progressively lose their vision with nothing to do about it. But the retina specialists, since anti-VEGF came out, they're the only doctors that do it. Like general ophthalmologists typically don't, optometrists don't. So they have been inundated with these wet AMD patients that need not only an injection, they need multiple injections weeks together. So you can imagine, and I'm sure most wet AMD patients would appreciate the fact that you sit with 50 other people in a waiting room until it's your turn for the retina guy to, swoop in and do your injection, maybe show you an OCT and tell you if it's better or worse. And then, I'll see you in another 4 or 5 weeks, etc. That my experience talking to the retina specialist and ophthalmologist is early AMD is going to live with optometry. It's just my belief. We have the time. We have, typically better resources, and we spend more with our patients than the majority of ophthalmologists do. And that's no knock about them. I mean, thank goodness they're around too. Like, we need the specialty care, but I always relate optometry to your primary care doctor, right? Sometimes you need someone who can put the whole picture together, right, and give you your best options and treatments, as opposed to seeing this retina specialist and maybe this, glaucoma specialist and this cataract surgeon, and everybody is just piece by piece by piece specialty, where, typically your optometrist is your primary eye doctor, that we can just put the pieces together, take a step back and say, this is the full picture about what's happening. And this is why we're catching it early. So all of my patients, I'll prep them like, listen, dark adaptation is new. Like, this is different. There's not a lot of talk about early AMD. So I welcome second opinions. I'm never offended when somebody's like, I went to, we live close to Philadelphia, so a lot of it, I went to Will's Eye for another opinion. Cool, like, go. But FYI, if you go there, they're going to tell you don't need to be on nutraceuticals. They're not going to have dark adaptation there. So they're not going to know that. And you may go down there and they can tell you I'm totally crazy, just prepping you, because that's totally possible. That a lot of optometrists, their hold back from adapting to dark adapt and doing this early is that patients will seek second opinions, and the retina specialists will say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Like, just, so I like to just be upfront. Listen, the only way we can manage this right now in the year of 2021 is to catch it early, implement things, slow it down, and maintain your vision. The retina specialist is there when we need them, down the road. But because of that, I'm more aggressive about macular degeneration compared to most of my colleagues. And there's not a lot bad that I'm putting you at risk for by educating you and recommending these changes. So you're welcome to go somewhere else, but that's probably the feedback you'll get. And most of them come back and say, your exam was a lot more thorough than there was. And you gave me a lot more information than they did. Like, I know. That's why you come back and see me in the end.
We're coming up to the 5 o'clock hour, an hour from now, and there are so many more things we could talk about. So we'd like to get you back for sure. Right now, let's turn it over to the audience, see if they have any questions for now. I want to also say that we have some people who are leaving us. This is recorded. You can listen to it again. I will go back through the comments and make sure that everything I said I was going to do, I'll do, but I'll probably do it tomorrow morning. And that is to give you a link to the doctors that have the dark adaptation equipment and anything else. And then if you have ideas for topics you'd like to have the doctor to come back, please, we'll talk about that tomorrow. But questions, what questions do you have? Type them. Here's somebody else. Thank you so much. We'll check back later. That's great.
I have intentions of adding more posts over time with like early macular degeneration, intermediate, etc. So we'll go through that every couple of days, a week or so as I have time, and we'll get more information that way too.
And Sharon says, so happy to have you as a member of our group. You're most welcomed and appreciated. We got some loves and some likes floating up the screen. And when you come back, we could talk about certainly the 4C home and how it works or doesn't work. We have some people who have it and some people who have been told that it might be a good thing. And then somebody said more information on wet. Certainly, absolutely. We can do that. Okay, what else?
I already put my retina specialist into lecturing about wet and anti-VEGF whenever you'd like, so we can arrange that.
Yes, absolutely. And we have, thank you for being an optometrist on the cutting edge. This is where everyone who is at risk should start. Great info. Thank you so much. Thank you. This has been so helpful. Thanks so much. So very appreciative of your coming here.
And honestly, thank you for letting eye doctors in, and as I've become more just generally frustrated with eye care over time, it came to me to join a Facebook macular degeneration support group to learn a little bit myself of your experiences, which is going to help me in the long term. But there were several AMD support groups that said like no eye doctors allowed, etc. So it was just chance happenstance that I decided on this one first, and just so impressed with the community is awesome. The information is great. And if we can get like a little grassroots movement here and get a fire under your eye doctors from the patients up, like I'm here for that too.
I agree. And then I'm just so happy to have you, because I have been railing that I personally, one of the things I want to do is I want to impress upon doctors about the fact that, again, these are people. These are people who are scared, who need information, and not just sent out the door and said, well, you have this terrible disease. They go out and talk to other people, say, oh, my aunt went blind and da 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 da. So we're very, very
and that's
happy.
kind of the only thing people don't really know. When I say, you know, I'm going to say something not so nice, but you have macular degeneration, and this is what it means. And almost everybody's, am I going to go blind? Because that's all you know. You just know the term macular degeneration. People lose their vision from it. You know, it's terrifying. When we know a lot of patients with macular degeneration never have vision loss. You know, it's not a sight in that way, that just because you are diagnosed, especially early, that you will lose vision from it. The sad fact of it is that 78% of patients right now are only diagnosed when they're 20/50 or worse in one eye. They don't even know it. There's no reason for somebody to find out you have macular degeneration when your vision is already damaged, because it has been there for years already. Wow.
Well, I learned some new things, and that's my goal in life, to learn something new every day. And there's a couple things I learned, so thank you personally. I'll be in touch.
Welcome.
We want to get your friend, the RS, to come in and talk about wet AMD, and get you back to talk about other things, including the 4C home. So thank you for giving us your time Sunday. We appreciate it. All right. We'll go ahead and sign off then.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.